Welcome to Technical Leadership Talks, the podcast that brings you advice, insights, and knowledge from industry leaders and experts on how to navigate managing in a technical field. Technical Leadership Talks is brought to you by Texas A&M University's Master of Engineering Technical Management, an online graduate program that trains industry professionals for leadership positions. I'm Katie, METM's digital marketer and your host for this episode. In today's episode, I speak with Matt Edghill. We are speaking about transitioning from engineering as an individual team contributor into leadership. Matt speaks about his own experience moving up the ranks at Lockheed Martin and the advice he would give to others who are on similar leadership journeys.
I am the director in the engineering department at Lockheed Martin Aeronautics. So my team, my directorate is the structures and materials team. Our role, it really starts from the beginning of the design part of the process. And then we go all the way through until the aircraft actually gets retired. And we help develop the force management strategies on how to maintain the airplane and its systems throughout its life cycle.
So were you at Lockheed Martin when you first transitioned into a leadership role yourself?
I was, yeah.
Okay.
So I first moved into leadership in 1999 was my first formal leader role. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we were, can't remember if we were Lockheed Martin at that time or if we were a form prior.
What originally inspired you to want to switch over to that leadership role?
It was somewhat of a natural growth. The way we were traditionally organized, as you work through the technical ranks, you got to a certain level where you either stayed very, very technical, mm-hmm. or you could pursue more of a leadership kind of a career path. And for me personally, I like the technical work, but I also like the ability to influence mm-hmm. Customer actions, have real impact on customer decisions. I also enjoyed the business applications of our work and where we fit from, a financial perspective within the business. And then I also like the bigger thing probably was the ability to impact direction and future outcomes. So more of a strategic application of where we fit into the overall either program or business at large. So that naturally moved me more toward the leadership field.
Whenever you were making that switch over, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced?
Yeah, so I think one of the hardest things, it certainly was for me, and then watching other leaders grow, I think mm-hmm. it's a common challenge is, you spend a lot of your early career executing. In really learning your craft and in driving execution performance. And then when you step into leadership, that responsibility has now grown much wider, and you got to get comfortable letting others do that hard technical execution without your over influencing how they do it. You can still mm-hmm. you still have responsibility for the technical integrity of the product, mm-hmm. but maybe not so much of, well, I would have written it this way instead of that, mm-hmm. and you've got to allow people their own space too. So mm-hmm. so learning how to kind of demonstrate trust to your team, I think, is critical. And then the other thing, too, is you very quickly find yourself at a point of you can't do it all anymore on your own. And so mm-hmm. you have to learn how to delegate. And again, part of that delegation is you've got to be willing to trust the team that you're supporting, give them some space to find their own footing, including some space maybe to fail, but then mm-hmm. quickly course correct and let them grow in that as well. And it's kind of hard to take your hands off the wheel sometimes, but if you can effectively do that, your team will grow at a very fast rate. And, they will find ways to do things, much to your own surprise, will be better than how you would have done mm-hmm. it. So that was one of my biggest challenges when I first stepped into leadership.
Yeah. What other skills do you think that people who are becoming leaders need to have or need to develop in order to fulfill those positions successfully?
So I think one of the other considerations in kind of a mind shift that I think effective leaders make is it's no longer a focus on your individual career and your individual career growth. You really are there to enable the team to perform. You're there to help the team grow and be successful. And a lot of times the way to do that best is by taking yourself out. It's that old axiom of, if you take care of the people who work for you, they'll take care of you as well. And so if I can make them successful, in turn, I'll be successful in my role. But it's a shift of focus of, now my major role is, are people growing in their field of pursuit? Are they challenged with the work assignments that they have? Are they able to work through difficulty, whether it's technical difficulty or personnel related difficulty, or sometimes it's, we all have outside lives too, right? And so, sometimes it's helping people just manage, time conflicts and other challenges that we bring all of that with us to work as well. And, sometimes you just have to help people, tell people, hey, it's okay for you to take time off of work because you want to go spend time with your family. That's a good thing, and you'll be a better employee for it. And, we'll manage until you get back. That's okay. But sometimes people have to be told that they've got that freedom to do that, and that it's appropriate behavior on their part. So to try to strike the right work-life balance, you got to find your energy somewhere. You can't expend all of it in the workplace.
Right. What about conflict management? I know that's a big step from just doing technical based work, is you suddenly have to manage people, and with people comes conflict. So how do you suggest people who are becoming new leaders approach conflict management?
My advice to new leaders is, the strongest relationships, I think, are trust-based relationships. I tell my direct staff all the time that one of their key jobs is to make sure I don't do something stupid, because I tell them I have no misperceptions on my ability to screw something up. Being real to people and letting them know that, you're not going to be perfect as a leader and that you're growing as well. And then really relying on, part of building those trusting relationships is, having respect for others and their abilities in letting them influence direction and decisions. But you will find yourself at a point where there will be conflict, either if it's in a technical decision that has to be made, and you'll have someone with a strong opinion that'll say, I think this is wrong and this is why. And, you have to, for me at least, it's most successful if that person knows that they've honestly been heard and I've considered it. And even then, if I don't agree with it, I'll tell them why I don't agree with it. I do appreciate their inputs, but here's the decision I'm making. And most people are okay with that. Once in a while, you'll find people who will really struggle. If you can help them through it, that's great. And sometimes you have to leave them with it and let them work through it on their own too. Yeah. But again, I think if people ultimately trust that you have their best interests in mind, and you really are, and you consistently demonstrate that you're working for them, they'll do really hard things for you. And then even if it's something they don't agree with, ultimately they still trust that, you're trying to do the best thing, and, they can get on board with it. And I think that's one of the challenges for leaders as they move up through an organization, because then as your organization grows, it's really hard to establish those one-on-one relationships with individuals. And I think also with going through the COVID event and the growth in teleworking and telecommuting, it makes establishing those relationships even more difficult. So leaders have got to take additional steps to reach out to people. And then if you're in the engineering environment, there's a lot of engineers that aren't real outgoing. So then you really have to be mindful as to, have I heard from so-and-so in a while? And if I haven't, I need to reach out to them. Just, if nothing,
take the initiative.
Yeah. And, sometimes you can start with just a quick IM and, hey, just checking in. How's it going? and see where that can lead you to. And I've been shocked a lot of times when either I'll see someone in the office or on a call, and I just start with, how's everything going?
Yeah.
And then give people the opportunity to talk about something. It doesn't always have to be, specific work assignments.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So kind of going off of the post-COVID world and how things have changed, one of my questions was, how do you envision the role of technical leadership evolving in the coming years, particularly in light of advancements in technology and changes in industry trends? So you sort of answered it a little bit there, but if you wanted to have anything to add onto that question, I wanted to give you a chance.
Yeah, I think one of the spaces that's really going to be interesting to see how people manage through it is the whole drive for artificial intelligence, machine learning, some of the advanced integrated systems that we're starting to bring into the workplace to drive efficiencies. There's always a quick win mentality of, I can reduce my costs and I can go faster if I automate, A, B, and C. And that may be true in spaces. One of the things I've kind of been using is you can't take the engineer out of the engineering process. So, you can build really nice automated tools, but if I put a bunch of garbage into it on the front end, I'm going to get a bunch of garbage out of it on the back end. And we've seen it already in some of these more public AI test cases that have come out, right? It's what do you feed this with? And the results are going to be as good as the data that you're feeding into it. I think the focus for leaders is going to shift more toward ensuring that, number one, the processes around these advanced capabilities are still complete and verifiable. And then what are you doing to validate the outcome, whether that's validating it with hard data that you've generated from test or, but somehow you've got to be able to score yourself from a validation perspective. So that what's coming out of these advanced tools and advanced methods is still a reasonable answer. And part of that, it goes back to some of the basic engineering fundamentals. So you've got to take the output and have skilled people with experience be able to look at it and say, that answer makes sense, or no, this answer makes no sense, because that tells you've got a failure somewhere in your internal process. In some of these tools, I've told people you can generate really good answers really fast, and you can generate really bad answers really fast. You've got to be able to manage through that.
Could you describe what strategic and tactical imperatives are, and how can they be used by leaders in a technical field?
Sure. So what we do in Lockheed Martin is, we have very high level strategic imperatives that align to the strategic goals of our customers. And they can be very complex battle space initiatives that span the range from, space-based to land-based to air-based to sea-based to undersea-based. And it's everything in between, and how do you merge all of that stuff to be effective? So at the big level, it's very complex, highly integrated. And then as leaders, our challenge is, okay, how do we take those piece parts for the areas of disciplines that we own and control? How do we align our strategic imperatives so that they bolster the corporate and customer strategic imperatives? And then as a leader, how do I take that and boil it down to tactical actions that we are going to do at program levels within our competencies, such that we are delivering at a tactical level? So, the blocking and tackling of executing our business, how are we doing those tactical execution steps such that they support, at increment levels that are built up to higher system levels that align to the overall strategic plan and strategic imperatives. So it's, taking something at a very high level scale, big picture, and constantly, boiling that down with more refinement and then being able to communicate that to our individual team members of this is where your job fits. This is why your role is important. This is why it's important to our program. This is why you're important to our customer. This is why you're important to the business as a whole. And for us, why it's important to our national security interests. I think part of building an engaged workforce, though, is in a challenge that leaders have is how do I tailor that message for each individual on my team so they can see themselves in it? And if you can get to that point, you've got really effective teams.
Yeah, and it gives them purpose.
Right, because they've got to have a reason more than a paycheck, to come in and do this every day. And it'll be different for each employee. Some will engage because they really like the technical work. Others will engage because they really, are tied to the mission. And it's everything in between. And part of the challenge for our first line leaders is finding that out for each individual on their team.
That's great. Okay, so my last question is just, do you have any final advice that you'd like to give to people who are new leaders or hope to become new leaders soon in the future that we didn't get to talk about yet?
Yeah, so I think one of the other critical skills to develop and get comfortable with is making decisions. And that might seem really obvious, but I've seen a lot of leaders really get stalled. They either get stalled because, they're concerned or fearful with making a bad decision, so they don't decide, which is always a bad decision. Or you can go the opposite way where, people will overreact to schedule pressure and feel like, well, I've got to do something now. And maybe that's the wrong place to be in too. But it's understanding what level of risk is acceptable in your role, how you manage that, and then also understanding that as a leader in engineering, by definition, we work in the gray space between black and white. So you're never going to have all the data that you would really want. None of it is going to be perfect, even if you had the data. So you've got to work through, what are the risks and opportunities in the impact of your decision, and also look back to the past on how did people do this before me and how did they do it effectively and successfully, and what can I learn from, my predecessors. Right. And then also, what are the new challenges that I've got to deal with, but then get comfortable with making a decision. And if it's wrong, then, you try to find out fast and then adjust and correct as fast as you can. And a lot of times I think that cycle is actually faster and the learning can be faster. And then it gives you an opportunity to model that behavior for your team as well. It's okay to tell your team that, hey, here's where we were. I made this decision. It turned out that was the wrong thing to do. And this is how we course correct.
Thank you for listening in to today's episode. Tech Leadership Talks is brought to you by Texas A&M University's Master of Engineering Technical Management. To learn more, visit metm.tamu.edu.